Why hasn't North Korea's leadership tried to follow a path like China's to improve the economy and quality of life? Improving quality of life for its citizens isn't a priority. Maintaining power is. China's reforms involve ceding governmental power, and NK views those reforms as mistakes they don't want to repeat. I think it's because they have two different goals. China wants, or at least wanted, to be top dog. After the complete failure that was Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, China realized that pure communism was not what will lead their country to be a success. So they introduced economic change. China has the whole century of humiliation. Their goal was to be recognized and respected on the world stage, and to be one of the most powerful nations on earth. People's Democratic Republic of Korea doesn't care that they are a poor hell-hole country. It only cares to keep certain very powerful people on top, and to only keep the poor outside of Pyongyang in their place. Things have gotten too bad at this point. If people found out what the rest of the world was really like, Kim wouldn't survive. China's astonishing growth was only possible due to massive foreign direct investment as a result of improvement in relations with Western countries during Deng Xiaoping era late 70s and 80s. At that time, North Korea was heavily dependent on the USSR, and a rapprochement with the West was probably considered to be too risky. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Kim Jong-il attempted to normalize relationships with the West via the 1994 Non-Proliferation Agreement with the USA, which ultimately failed. While both sides blame each other for the failure of the 1994 agreement, the fact is the NK never held a fraction of the bargaining power that China had, and which allowed China to receive massive foreign investment without any risk to their leaders' power over the country. Why? Those who matter in North Korea lay very well. It turns out that having a starving and uneducated populace makes for poor counter-revolutionaries. At least a monarchy has to answer to the noble classes. In contrast, the entire country of North Korea revolves around Kim and his family, so any attempts on reforming the nation could potentially destabilize this structure the Kim family have put on themselves. This is why it makes more sense to look at his decisions through the lens of what keeps the Kims in power rather than what's better for the Korean people. North Korean leadership stays in power because the people are starving, not in spite of it. Its population is so hungry that they can't actually rise up. They spend every minute of every day worrying about their next meal. There is a middle ground where people are hungry, but have enough surplus to have the time and energy to rebel. If they start improving the lives of their people, at some point in the process, they will hit that middle ground where the people are desperate enough to rebel and have the energy to do so. North Korea exists only to protect northern China from the US. It is not a nation-state. It is a march. They can't. Here are the reasons why. China's economic opening has one crucial aspect that many overlook. The US has shifted much of its manufacturing to China, allowing Chinese goods to be sold to American consumers. This is the secret to China's wealth. The US gave them money and investments. No US cash, no China. North Korea, however, cannot replicate this model. While it could open up its economy without US purchases, there will be no cash flow. The US is unlikely to relocate manufacturing there anytime soon, meaning that North Korean-made iPhones won't be a reality in the near future. Thus, even if North Korea opens up, it won't matter unless the other half of the equation is addressed. The US needs to invest and buy from North Korea, transferring money to them. But that is not going to happen. There is one communist country that is opening up and to which the US is willing to invest: Vietnam. If the US continues to funnel money and investments into Vietnam, it could emerge as the next powerful economy in Asia within the next 20 to 30 years. For a dictator, the first priority at any time is to maintain his dictatorship, and the interests of the dictator are not the same as those of the state. Trying to make economic reforms requires giving up some power, which of course serves the interests of the population, but harms the dictatorship. When Kim can easily send 12,000 North Koreans to the battlefields of Ukraine as cannon fodder in exchange for some kind of aid, then you would never choose economic reform. The Chinese people just got lucky. After Mao died, China didn't have a powerful dictator like the Kim family. And even if Deng Xiaoping wanted to trade the people's interests for some support, he couldn't. The Soviet Union's economy was already failing at that time, and there was no other country in the world that could sustainably aid a country of 1.3 billion people. So China's economic reforms were more of a risk that had to be taken at 1979. If China had only 20 million people, economic reform would never have been an option. North Korea used to be the economically superior to South Korea up to 30 years ago. War economy and some bad decisions screwed it up. They have a completely different status quo from China, they can't copy them. but they failed to find their own way. There's no motivation to. As far as the NK leadership are concerned, things are going great. No uprisings. The people in power are rich, protected by China, because the regime has no interest in that. Unlike China, North Korea opening up to the world would be the end of the Kim dynasty. The government of North Korea is extremely paranoid about that. The only thing that matters to Kim is keeping his family rich and in power. Starving the masses really doesn't bother him. It's a dictatorship, so if anyone doesn't worship him, he's doomed. So, he keeps a tight control on everything to make sure that he stays in power. Sanctions. China doesn't have an embargo on it. NK is the most embargoed country in the world. Plus, it's much easier to develop and thrive when you have such a vast territory and such a numerous population as China has. China has a lot of very smart and capable leaders. Unfortunately, they are commies, but they understand how to plan and build. North Korea is run by drunk adolescent idiots. Part of the reason China developed so quickly is this. China adopted a capitalist economy and kept a communist government. Since China has adopted capitalism, it means that the government has effectively lost control of manufacturing and production, as that is now run by the private sector. North Korea is not quite ready to loosen government control. And even if they did, they most likely would take the Russian approach and form oligopolies, where trusted loyalists would run manufacturing and production of goods. Many businesses, particularly US tech companies, helped China evolve its manufacturing and tech infrastructure, and Japanese and European companies helped China develop its lifestyle infrastructure. China guaranteed to the private sector that China is open for business. North Korea would have to relinquish a lot of power to let something like this happen. Lastly, North Korea doesn't have the talent to evolve like China did. When China adopted capitalism, China accepted workers from many countries in the world like EU and the US.